Hi, I'm Dr. Stan Steindl, and welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt, where we explore the science and practice of compassion and how it can really transform lives. Two of the biggest questions we humans ask ourselves are, what is the meaning of life, and why is there suffering in the world? We often treat them as if they're separate, as if meaning should exist in spite of suffering. But what if the very presence of suffering is part of what gives life its meaning? Let's start with a couple of ancient perspectives. Aristotle believed that the purpose of life was to seek eudaimonia, a kind of flourishing that comes from living a life of virtue. He didn't see suffering as something to avoid, but as something to navigate with wisdom and character. And on the other side of the world, the Buddha began with a different premise altogether, that life is suffering, dukkha, and the path to freedom lies in recognizing this and responding to it with compassion. So while they came from different traditions, both these ancient sages saw that suffering is an unavoidable part of the human experience, and that our response to it matters deeply. Now, for me personally, the turning point came in high school when I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It was the book that put me on the path towards psychology and eventually compassion. Frankl was a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor who endured unimaginable suffering, and yet he discovered something profound. When we're no longer able to change the situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. He believed that within every moment of suffering is the possibility of discovering meaning, especially when we choose how to respond. That's the heart of it, really. Suffering is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It's part of being alive, of having a human brain and a human heart. In compassion-focused therapy, we often remind ourselves that we all have tricky brains, evolved over millions of years to survive threats, form attachment and pursue goals, but those same brains also generate pain, fear, shame, grief, disappointment. So the question is not, how do we get rid of suffering? But how do we respond to it in ways that bring meaning and connection? And this is where compassion steps in, because when suffering arises, whether it's our own or someone else's, we have a choice. We can turn away, go numb, get angry, or we can turn towards it with care, wisdom, and courage. We can soften our response, offer warmth, sit beside the suffering rather than trying to run from it. Frankl once said that suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning, and compassion might just be the bridge that helps us find that meaning. Now let's talk about what I call the dance of compassion, because when someone we love is in pain, our instinct is to reach out, to help, to try to make it better, and that's beautiful, but it's a delicate balance here. Compassion isn't about taking on someone else's pain as our own. It's about staying present with them without being consumed by what they're feeling. I sometimes say to suffer with someone is not to drown with them. It's to bring a lifeboat, sit beside them, and help them row. This means we hold our empathy with boundaries. We feel with them, but we don't lose ourselves in the process. We care, but we don't take on responsibility for fixing them. We recognize their pain, but we also recognize their agency. Thomas Aquinas, the medieval philosopher, described love as willing the good of the other. And that, to me, is what compassion looks like. Not enmeshment, not rescue, but wise and loving presence that helps others find their own path forward. In compassion-focused therapy, we talk about the three flows of compassion: compassion to others, compassion from others, and compassion to ourselves. All three are essential, and all three help us to respond to suffering, not with panic or judgment or despair, but with steadiness, strength, and care. We humans are wired for this. We're not just survival machines, we're connection makers. Our species didn't get this far by turning away from pain. We got here by caring for each other, soothing each other, being there in times of hardship. The Buddhists talk about karuna, the cultivated intention to alleviate suffering. And CFT echoes that. We learn to notice suffering, respond with courage, and take compassionate action, even if that action is simply staying present with the person. That kind of compassion isn't just helpful, it's meaningful. It gives our lives direction, a purpose, a deeper connection to others. and to ourselves. So where does that leave us? Well, maybe life doesn't offer a single predetermined meaning. Maybe meaning is something we create, moment by moment, in how we meet suffering, with compassion. Aristotle showed us the importance of living virtuously, even in the face of difficulty. The Buddha taught us that suffering is inevitable, but so is the path of compassion. And Viktor Frankl reminded us that even in the worst of circumstances, we can still choose how to be. Maybe meaning isn't a destination we arrive at, but a way of being we cultivate, a way of walking beside others, of being present with ourselves, of meeting pain with kindness, and finding purpose in how we respond. So the question isn't just, why is there suffering? But who do we become when we respond to suffering with compassion? And maybe that's where the meaning lies. Thanks for being here. If this message resonated with you, I'd love you to subscribe, leave a comment, or share your own story of finding meaning through compassion. I'll see you next time on Compassion in a T-shirt.